Hello guys and gals and welcome. So I'm not one to normally do react videos like Ginger Gaming Mentor reacts, but quite a few people have been telling me about this review in chat. So let me preface this by saying that I really didn't pull this up. I don't even know who this guy is, to be honest with you. But quite a few people have been telling me about this review and saying that it has some pretty hot takes in it, like really hot takes that don't really make a whole lot of sense. And I'd like to kind of go over it, and we'll take a look at it, shall we? So, what is he actually? He's got minor complaints, a fatal flaw, scaling, dark tone makes no sense. Oh, we gonna fight over that one. We gonna fight over that. Dumb stats and boring loot. Gold is worthless. Wow, this is gonna be fun. All right, let's just go ahead and dive in, shall we? And I'll pause it as necessary to comment.
Everybody, this is the Christian man here, and today I'm really disappointed, like more so than usual, because Diablo 4 started off so strong. Blizzard hooked me in. I was invested in the story, in the gameplay, but I guess I wasn't a fish worth catching. I'm just a lowly sea bass in Animal Crossing, worth only 120 bells. I guess the reason I use this analogy is because I've accepted that I'm no longer the target demographic of Diablo games. I've realized that Blizzard ain't making these games for people with my kind of interests. In truth, the tastes of modern gamers has evolved and changed, and Diablo is more profitable than it's ever been. But that doesn't necessarily mean the games are better than they've ever been, and I'll die on that cross. So yes, you read the title right. I don't like Diablo 4, and I think it's a bad video game. That is my personal opinion. If you enjoy this game, don't let me change your mind, okay?
If there's one thing I love,
Wait, hold on.
it's the sight of blood.
You know,
In Diablo 4, there are
I actually
rivers
think
of
I like this game. I'm not here to police your entertainment. You like what you like, that's fine by me, man. What I'm here to do is whine, bitch, moan, and complain into the ether like an old man. Like an ancient Haradrim who can't understand why everyone's forgotten the old ways. I really wanted to like Diablo 4, but the longer I played it, the more I came to despise it. But before we jump into hell, this video is sponsored by Rocket Money, an all-in-one finance platform that helps you save more. The combat in Diablo 4 is very fluid and fun overall. It feels good to slaughter hordes of demons with lightning bolts. Now, I didn't play much of 3, but between Diablo 1, 2, and 4, this one might have the best enemy design in the series, or at least...
Hey, he just earned some points for me because he didn't play Diablo 3. He played 1, 2, and 4. He ain't played 3. He's better off than me because I played 3 and I regret it.
It's the most interesting. In the early game, leveling up is extremely satisfying. When I saw this big skill tree for the first time, I just thought, I can't wait to max this out. And one thing I really do appreciate is that boss fights are more about dodging attacks instead of like the classic brute force, is my number bigger than that boss's number, you know? Because it adds a much greater emphasis on skill and strategy. A lot of boss fights in D1 and D2 were battles of attrition that could get pretty tedious. Now, I played as a druid, and all the abilities were cool, flashy, and felt awesome to use. The game certainly fulfills the power fantasy many are looking for in a Diablo title, and I appreciate that Blizzard tried to return Diablo to its gothic horror roots instead of the fucking Disney cartoon art style they came up with for Diablo 3. So I think with the core gameplay, they've succeeded. Now, before we get into the real shit, let's discuss some minor complaints. For one, Diablo 4 is a modern video game.
With all the new features that people really love and appreciate in modern games.
Which means it has to be always online just to shove...
He curses an awful lot for somebody who has 1 million views. And, you know, it's kind of difficult to get monetization. And this has nothing to do with his review, of course, but, like, it's kind of difficult to get monetization and money out of YouTube if you're, like, just dropping F-bombs and S-bombs all over the place in your video. Like, I gotta imagine that this video probably got demonetized. He has over 1 million views on it, and he's probably limited in the amount of money that he can make from it, and he's probably kicking himself in the teeth right now because literally he dropped way too many freaking F-bombs and S-bombs in his video, and so his 1 million views, which probably would have been like $5,000 or $6,000 in his pocket, probably turned into like 500 or 600 by comparison because he ended up getting limited demonetization.
half-assed MMO mechanics in a game that basically has no social features and virtually no reason for players to interact with each other.
It's so easy to create a community.
What?
It makes Diablo more of a social experience.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Always online also means if the servers get fucked, then so do you. It's like Blizzard literally learned nothing from Diablo 3. You know, when I see someone lose their hardcore character after putting hundreds of hours into it, and they lose it because of a server issue and not a skill issue, yeah, fuck that noise. That's bullshit. At first, I thought it was pretty cool that they added a horse into this game until I unlocked the horse. I mean, it's so janky. It takes like 10 seconds to warm up its engine before it starts running. Like what the fuck? Hey-ya! Hey-ya! Come on, giddy up! Giddy up, you bastard! Okay, there he goes. Okay, now on to the real shit.
I mean, the horse is jankety. Let's be perfectly honest. The horse is jankety. And literally, this dude has literally dropped more F-bombs and S-bombs in like a minute than you'll see on like literally an entire 8-hour live stream of mine, which is just, yeah, he's not getting any money from this million views that he made. He literally has like 1 million views on this video, and he's probably getting like absolutely nothing from it for actual like revenue.
Diablo 4, for me, contains 2 crippling, fun-ruining flaws. Flaws so important that if changed, I would continue playing the game without question. Number 1, the difficulty. Number 2, the skills. Let's start with difficulty. So I stopped playing at level 48 after beating the campaign. Now,
I'm just going to pause him right here. I stopped playing at level 48 after beating the campaign. Level 48, boys. Level 48. Like, I hate to say it, but that's nothing. It's literally nothing. Like, World Tier 2, level 48 is like nothing. You basically haven't even scratched the surface of the game at that point. Like, you haven't gotten access to really all your sacred equipment yet. You haven't gotten access to the ancestral items. You haven't beaten the World Tier 3 capstone boss, which was one of the biggest difficulty challenges in the game, as opposed to, you know, like, obviously someone can carry you through it, but if you actually go and try and beat the World Tier 3 capstone boss on your own, like as a level 48 character with garbage equipment, you're going to have a hard time. And then when you get to the World Tier 4 capstone boss, which he never made it to, of course, because he's in World Tier 2, that one is even harder because it requires you to level up your character to a decent level to actually get access to that boss. So, like, basically what he's saying is he never actually took part in any of the content that was actually difficult. He had an easy time because he just never passed World Tier 2 level 48, which is really low level. Like, level 48 is like bare minimum, like I mean, how long did it take me to hit, like, to beat the campaign? Was it like 3 days? Like, it's like 3 days of effort. Like, I can't even remember exactly, but I think it was like 3 days and I had beaten the campaign, and I was like level 48. So, like, he spent like 3 days playing the game.
Now, you can run down to the comments section and tell me what a casual scrub I am, that I need to play on World.
I'm doing it on live stream. I'll tell you what casual scrub you are right here. Level 48, World Tier 2 is casual scrub level. I'm sorry. That is absolutely 100% correct.
Tier 3, and how Diablo 4 starts to get fun and challenging after I beat the game and reach level 50. And if you're thinking that, you've just proven my point. Why do I have to dump 30 hours into Diablo 4 simply to unlock a difficulty option that suits my skill and experience? Well, because that's how it's always been, Act Man. Yeah, you're right. The big difference is in Diablo 1 and 2, the games weren't this easy. And D2 had some extreme difficulty spikes. The base game is so ridiculous.
Okay, I'm gonna stop right here and I'm gonna make a comment as well because this is stupid. Okay, let me say this just right off the top of the bat here. Diablo 2, which is probably the best game in the series, like, bar none, is extremely easy in normal difficulty. Like, normal difficulty is so easy in that game that it literally, most of us who play Diablo 2 literally consider normal difficulty to be the tutorial for the game. Like, literally, it's that easy that we consider it to be the tutorial. It's literally where you learn the basics of the game, and the game literally walks you through, like, holding your hand the entire time and teaches you, like, everything that you need to know to actually get good, so that when you get to nightmare difficulty, you don't end up just, like, getting absolutely demolished into oblivion. If Diablo 2 started you with nightmare difficulty, the game would be insanely more challenging, because nobody would ever know what the hell to do, and they would just walk out of town and get one shot by everything because they don't have the right equipment. And in normal difficulty in Diablo 2, it is super ridiculously easy. And every single game has been this way. Diablo 2 has had a really easy normal difficulty to start out with. Diablo 1 was actually surprisingly easy from the get-go in the normal difficulty, and then get ramped up really hard in the later parts of the game. Diablo 1, sorry, if I don't know if I said that correctly. Diablo 3 was actually pretty darn easy, too, in the early levels. Like, before, when they start adding in the torments and things like that, like, most of the time you could make a new character, and you could just put the character in, like, Torment 1. Like, easily. Like, you could just take a brand new character, like, fresh off the gate, and you could put him in Torment 1 difficulty. And if that doesn't scream that the early levels of the game and the early, like, access to the game is extremely easy for basically everyone, like, all of the games, and he said he didn't play Diablo 3, so I guess that's one that we can, like, remove from the equation, but it's still, at the same time, like, all of the games have an easy upfront game mode that you have to play. Meanwhile, we're over here in World Tier 4 getting our butts absolutely handed to us by Tier 100 sigils, where, like, even a tiny little baby spider comes up and bites us and literally one-shots us with poison of the gods that comes out of our anus.
Easy that by the time I got to that climactic finale in hell, I was bored out of my mind, begging for it to end. After an experience like that, why the hell would I keep playing? I did end up doing the first capstone dungeon, and for whatever reason, that was like a light switch. It's like, oh my god, I'm actually dying to boss mechanics and not just cheap gimmicks like hard crowd.
Wait a minute. He said he only got to World Tier 2, level 48, and now he said he's doing one of the capstone dungeons. So he's doing the World Tier 2 to World Tier 3 capstone dungeon, and he's actually dying to stuff. So he literally, in his own statement here, has disproven his own statement, basically saying that he did actually encounter things that were difficult. But then what? When it got difficult, he just gave up?
Control that locked me in place for 5 seconds? I'm not exaggerating when I say every single death I had, besides this boss, was from hard crowd control. The game had...
Yes, that's why you need the unstoppable mechanic. So he's literally talking about how a lot of his deaths are to hard crowd control, which stops him and gets him killed. Like, for instance, on the screen right now, he has the freezing effect. But the stupid thing here is that, yes, like, that's a mechanic within the game that you have to counter. So you need unstoppable on any character that you play. If you are building a character and you do not have an unstoppable mechanic by this point, like, you're literally, what... He's level 37 in this clip, so and that hardly even really counts. But if you don't have some form of unstoppable by the time you get to, like, World Tier 3, then I don't know what you're doing, because, like, the bosses, the monsters, all the characters that have these hard crowd controls, you have to have a button to press to remove yourself from those crowd controls, or yes, you are in fact going to die. And I mean, I definitely have encountered some situations where I got locked in a permanent crowd control loop, and we were talking about that earlier with the with, like, multiple freezing monsters all at the same time. But I really doubt that he was actually, like, doing the mechanics properly if he was dying to one freezing monster.
Had to stop me from moving in order to kill me. This capstone dungeon was like the highlight of my playthrough, likely because I was underleveled for it. So why is this game so easy? In Diablo 4, literally everything scales with your level. The cost of items and upgrades, strength of enemies, gear. It's funny because every quest has a level recommendation next to it, yet it's always the same as your level, so it's like, what's the point? This does provide some positive benefits. It makes it easy to play with friends of higher or lower levels. You don't have to worry about your buddy who's played for 600 hours, one-shotting everything and robbing you of the gameplay experience. Another nice touch is that you don't ever out-level quests, dungeons, or the main story, so you can progress these things in any order you want. However, the drawbacks to the scaling difficulty are so flagrant and obvious, I can't believe more people aren't talking about them. Do you understand what it actually means for the entire game to scale with the player's level in an RPG? It means that the challenge stays virtually the same from start to finish. Why is this a problem? Well, it's gonna take a good long while to explain, but if the only available difficulty option is easy as balls, then you'll be begging for the sweet release of death. Now, we're gonna be comparing Diablo 4 to Diablo 1 and 2 and to World of Warcraft a lot. While WoW and D4 are different kinds of games, the core mechanics that make an RPG fun and satisfying to grind, I feel, are the same. So let's imagine if World of Warcraft was more like Diablo 4. Picture this, you just spent a bunch of time grinding levels, doing dungeons, raids, getting the best gear, becoming stronger. You go back to the starting area and guess what? That boar you fought at level 2 takes just as many hits to kill as when you're level 70. Would you feel like a badass in this situation? No, you'd feel like an asshole. Like you just got duped into wasting your time playing an RPG that fooled you into thinking you were growing and getting stronger. Now sure, you'd certainly have more abilities at level 70 than 2, but the point is when you level up in Diablo 4, you don't get stronger, the enemies do, and you receive a skill point to deal with it. So because the challenge is consistently easy from start to finish, I was basically playing this game on autopilot, and if I wanted a game I could turn my brain off and play, I'd grind RuneScape. But Diablo is an action RPG. I want action. I want something that's fun, exciting, and fraught with danger. And if it's got some spooky, scary moments, that's a huge plus too. This level scaling mechanic is one of the most fucked up things I've ever seen in an RPG. It goes beyond simply making the moment-to-moment combat stale and repetitive. And you might be thinking, well, man, what about Oblivion and Skyrim? Well, that's a lot different because you have some control over the difficulty, and the scaling only affects the types of enemies you encounter. So it's a lot different. To be fair, I think Diablo 4 excels in its...
So I want to cover this one real quick, and I talked about this in one of my my viewer videos too. So this will be a point that I actually agree with him on. So basically what this is when you're playing a game, you want to have places to go where you can feel powerful. So, you know, in Diablo 2, when you finally do get your character leveled up and geared and everything, and you go into Chaos Sanctuary on Player's Aid and you absolutely wreck face, you know, you feel powerful in that moment because you're in an area that you were having trouble with before, and you go in and you know, you're able to dish out massive amounts of damage there, right? So, you know, you have areas that are difficult and you have areas that are easy, but you also have, you know, like a existing scaling of like what's going on. So like, how powerful have I become? You know what I mean? It's a question that a lot of people like to have the answer to. How powerful have I become? So sometimes you just go back and you go to lower level content just to kind of get an idea. Like that boss that kicked your butt that one time, you want to go and see like if you can just kick his butt now. You're like, all right, let me see if I can kick his butt and demolish him from existence. Now the level scaling does diminish this to a certain degree. But it doesn't completely eliminate it. So it's actually quite interesting that he's actually wrong in this, because the level scaling does not completely eliminate the feeling of power that you have. So when you go back and you fight a boss that you were having trouble with before, and you're no longer having trouble with him, you have now proven that you have grown as a character. So despite the fact that the boss is maintaining the same level as you and is scaling with you, you go and you fight this boss, come back maybe say 10 levels later, and yes, he is now 10 levels higher than you, but you were having trouble 10 levels ago. And now when you fight him, you're no longer having trouble. I think that the system does a very good job of reflecting how well you build your character, as opposed to just simply donking on somebody who literally can't fight back. And I think it's the difference between taking candy from a baby, right? Or, you know, just simply fighting a monster that you had trouble with and proving that you're actually capable of killing them the second time. So while there is a certain element that is missing, where you can go back to a lower level dungeon and just simply donk on top of stuff and just laugh about it, the areas do exist where you can actually do this kind of stuff. On top of this, the nightmare dungeons, which I don't feel like he ever even got to. We'll see as we go forward, but I don't feel like he ever even got to the nightmare dungeons. And because of this, it probably means that he never got to the point where he was out-leveled. So all of the nightmare dungeons, literally to the point where you can go up to a level 100 sigil, and you can have monsters that are literally like 50 levels higher than yourself. he has probably not encountered that, because that is literally monsters that are so much stronger than you that they are literally donking on you. And on top of this, you can also go into lower level nightmare sigils, which completely avoid the level scaling process. And if you go into lower level nightmare sigils, you can, of course, fight monsters that are lower level than yourself, and you can donk on them if you want to.
This enemy design, there's a ton of cool creepy demons like those spider hosts and the walking ball sacks that spawn flies. The Balrogs return, as do the...
And, let me just go one step further here and say this. It really goes back to the fact that the beginning of the game, the part of the game that he played, is for newer characters. The level scaling system is really only super important at the beginning of the game when you have a lot of newer characters that are all trying to play together. And despite the fact that there is level scaling, the world tiers also help to further isolate the characters. So, for instance, when you get to World Tier 3 and when you get to World Tier 4, the monsters are a minimum level, which means they can no longer scale down below that minimum level. So if you take a lower level character into World Tier 4, you are now fighting level 73 monsters, like on regular. And it actually does get quite challenging when you're like a level 50 some odd character trying to fight level 73 monsters. And there definitely is quite an interesting thing that goes on there, where as you level up and as you progress as a character and you gear yourself out better, you start to become stronger and more confident in fighting those level 73 monsters, until eventually you are actually donking on those level 73 monsters as if they're trash, basically. And I often like to gauge the power of my character by how soon that happens. Like, can I donk on the level 73 monsters at level 53? Can I donk on them at levels 57? Does it take me till level 60 before I can donk on the level 73 monsters? Like, what level do I need to get to before all of a sudden these level 73 monsters are no challenge to me whatsoever? And it helps me gauge the power of the character.
Fallen, everything fits a theme based on the area it's in, and I like that. Enemies can spawn in unique ways. They unfreeze in the snowy areas or ambush you when you loot certain chests. Enemy movesets are flashy and fun to play around. Scaling fucks with the world and level design much more than you'd expect, because every corner of the game is now stuck at the same difficulty level. Therefore, no zone stands out or feels more challenging than the last. There is no sense of progression. Again, what if you took this scaling difficulty and added it to Elden Ring? What if you went to Caelid at the start and you didn't get your ass whooped by those giant dogs?
All right, I'm going to stop him right here, because Elden Ring is set up in the exact opposite way, which is literally all the monsters outlevel you by like massive degrees to the point of absolute absurdity. Like, literally in Dark Souls 1, which I think is the worst example known to man, literally you start out so weak, it's as if you are a baby kitten. Like, literally like a fresh kitten who has no eyes open and can barely even move around on the floor by comparison to a lot of the monsters that you fight in the Dark Souls series. And it's not until you level up your character a little bit, put some points in and get some equipment, that literally your Dark Souls 1 character, it like even approaches like the same power level as some of the monsters that you're fighting. The way that they start you in Dark Souls is literally the exact opposite of most games ever start you. Is they literally start you so weak that literally you can't do anything. Like, get hit by one monster and you're dead. Like, that kind of stuff is not very fun. Like, I've played the Dark Souls games. I've beat Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, and 4. I've beat Elden Ring. There are videos of my Elden Ring content on this channel if you want to check it out and actually see what I'm talking about. But it's not a good comparison, because starting out as a weak baby kitten is not fun. It's not fun to get one-shot by everything that attacks you. It's not fun to literally walk into the skeleton graveyard in Dark Souls 1 and not realize that the skeletons outlevel you by many, 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 many levels, to the point where literally the skeletons are just like annihilating you. And you don't really understand why. Like, there's no one there to tell you that those skeletons are so much higher level than you, and you shouldn't be fighting them. Like, you're not supposed to fight those skeletons in the beginning of Dark Souls 1. They are that powerful because that's an area you're not supposed to go in, but nobody tells you that. Like, if you want to compare, like, Diablo 4 to Elden Ring, basically what you're saying is you don't want a tutorial. Like, you don't want anything to teach you anything about the game. And that's really the cusp of what the Dark Souls series and the Elden Ring series is it's a series that throws you into a pit with a bunch of hungry tigers and doesn't tell you how to survive. And you just have to figure out how to survive as the tigers are literally ripping your arm off and eating your face. And then once you finally do figure out how to survive for these tigers, you get out of the pit only to be attacked by like a giant monster pack of wolves, and you've got to figure out how to survive that one as well. The game literally just continually makes you have to figure things out while you die, like over and over and over and over and over again.
Well, then that place wouldn't be as memorable. The desolate atmosphere and red-tinted sky would betray the tone of Caelid. The land of Caelid would not have this stigma among Souls fans of being a challenging, oppressive area of the game. And that's what makes it stand out. You get what I'm saying? When you give players far too much freedom to explore an open world and you don't gatekeep any sections of it, then they end up having nothing to look forward to and nothing to go back to. It feels like there's no rhyme or reason to what I'm doing in the world of Sanctuary, and it doesn't matter what order I do it in, so it all just feels the same to me. Is this...
Sounds like he really didn't pay attention to the quests then. I had a lot of fun paying attention to the quests. There were some really cool quests that had to do with things like the guy with no skin, the paladin quest that literally took you through the Crusaders like storyline, where you rescue the you get the armor for Joanna, and actually find out like the history of the paladins and how the Mephisto like invaded the temple. Like, there were so many cool storylines within Diablo 4 that like. The only thing I can assume is that he didn't read anything or pay attention to just about anything that wasn't like he wasn't forced to listen to or pay attention to.
Is this making any sense, or am I just talking out of my butthole? Butthole. You know how in Breath of the Wild, after leaving the tutorial, you could go straight to Ganon's castle? I mean, you'd stand no chance, but that type of freedom is genius because you're given a sense of progression in the world and the different zones. You're not supposed to be here yet, but the designers still let you. I feel like this is just like basic open world RPG design 101. They dangle a super hard boss or tough enemy in front of you and say, come back when you're stronger, bitch. There's plenty of examples, the anti-guy in Paper Mario, the skeletons next to Firelink Shrine, or the sword dancer in Tales of Symphonia. That's why going back to slaughter the Tree Sentinel was so satisfying, because at that point you feel like you've grown stronger and gotten better at the game since he whooped your ass.
I'm gonna completely disagree with him here, because I felt like Dark Souls was about trying to beat the bosses even when you knew they were stronger than you. Like, he basically just stated the exact opposite of how I play Dark Souls games, which, how I play Dark Souls games is when I find a boss, I try and beat that boss. And I don't care how powerful I am. I don't care if I've got the stick of the gods in my hand or if I have literally a pointed, sharpened rock that I found on the ground. If a boss is in front of me, I'm going to try and beat it. And literally, no game literally will show you this more than Elden Ring, because the day that I booted up Elden Ring and I found the Tree Sentinel there, I tried for hours to beat that Tree Sentinel with starter equipment and starter abilities. Like, I didn't have anything to my name, and I sat there for hours trying to beat that boss. And I came back several times once I upgraded my equipment a little bit to try and see if I could fight him, but I never was able to beat him until I actually activated some of the other abilities in the game that you were supposed to have when you were supposed to fight these bosses. So, like, I didn't realize that there was other things that you were supposed to have, like, that I was basically still not a complete character. But once I became a complete character within the Elden Ring series, I'm not talking about buffing up my character to extreme levels where I could just, like, one-shot him. Like, once I was a complete character, I went back and fought him, and I fought him for another several hours until I eventually beat him. Like, I don't generally have a lot of fun in Dark Souls games of making my character so broken overpowered that literally I go back and one-shot a boss. That's not fun to me. What's fun to me in Dark Souls games is struggling and beating a boss with minimal equipment. That's what's fun to me.
And it's that feeling of growth and accomplishment that I tend to chase in RPGs. Unfortunately, in my 30 hours of playing Diablo 4, I never once had that feeling. These types of difficulty spikes, they just give me something to look forward to. I need a challenge I can't beat yet, or a super difficult optional boss thrown in my face, a forbidden area I can't access yet. That's what inspires me to grind and get better gear, to see more of the game, right? If you brought Diablo 4's version of scaled difficulty to other RPGs, you'd see how fucking atrocious it is. Like I said, I did the first capstone dungeon at level 48, so I was 2 levels below the recommended, and after 30 hours, like, this was the challenge I'm looking for. The boss is well designed. Dying to him made me pissed. I felt some tension every time I got close to killing him and was running low on healing potions. My point is, why did I have to beat the game to start being challenged by it? Remember how simple Diablo 1 was? There were 16 levels and each one got progressively more difficult and was filled with different and tougher enemies. The soundtrack and visuals would change as you got closer to Diablo's lair and hell itself. This is a very simple way to convey to the player that the challenge was evolving. This doesn't happen in Diablo 4. It doesn't matter when you go to hell. The challenge will be the same. It's like, this is a game about fighting the forces of fucking hell. Slaying demons. I'm not the Doomslayer. I can't be the scariest thing in the game. I want it to be challenging. I want to run into some big fuck off demon that whoops my ass. Blizzard likes to remind everyone that Diablo 4 was going back to its roots. They say darkness has returned.
Well, the initial direction was Diablo 2.
The art direction for Diablo 4 is really rooted in this idea of delivering on the fantasy of a dark Gothic medieval world.
And that was kind of the initial art direction of the game in general, was darker and grittier, and Diablo 2 was kind of the inspiration.
We wanted to bring Diablo 4 artistically more back towards like Diablo 2, the much darker style.
Major redesign to make them feel more grim, a little scarier, a little darker.
And when writing this next chapter, we really wanted to return to our darker roots.
Everything's a little darker, everything's more difficult.
The story of Lilith and Inarius is the darkest story we've ever told.
What? Without me, you would have no victory. And its cost will be more than you can pay.
It's the darkest story we've ever told.
You have done well, Marius. Now I think you shall have your reward.
What have I done to deserve it?
You could compare this idea to Bloodborne or BioShock or Dead Space, where the gameplay matches the tone of the locations and narrative. You see, the brilliance of Diablo 1's design is there are very few moments where you can let your guard down, even at the start, because even the trash mobs can surround you and kill your ass. This made exploration in Diablo 1 very tense and methodical. It was an action RPG, but it also felt like a survival game. But this whole aspect of surviving the forces of hell started to become more and more irrelevant when they released the second game. The issue with Diablo 1's design is that it doesn't fulfill the power fantasy modern gamers are looking for in a Diablo game. Like I said, the tastes have changed, and I accept that. Diablo fans nowadays want to kill hordes of demons that fill up the entire screen, and they want to feel like a badass. The problem I have with this is it makes most fights with basic enemies feel totally trivial and pointless, because they serve no actual threat. Now, this doesn't bother me in normal RPGs where you outlevel enemies, because of the scaling, that's not a thing. At some point, I realized that fighting random enemies on the way to a quest was a waste of time, because the quest itself will give me demons to fight, so I might as well skip all combat in the open world entirely. You see, it's not enough to make a somewhat linear ARPG that progresses in challenge through 5 different acts. They need to make a Diablo game into some sort of endlessly replayable grind fest in order to maximize player retention and justify a live service business model. Diablo 2 was more open, but it was segmented, you know? You couldn't just run to the Act 5 area at the start of the game. If they had to have the open world, I would have suggested make the campaign somewhat linear, and then once players beat the game, the world opens up. But there would be a lot more to it than that. The point is, when you throw hundreds and thousands of trash mobs at me, it trivializes the combat and therefore trivializes the threat hell itself poses to the world.
Until literally the trash mobs are literally one-shotting you, which is what you encounter in the harder level content, which is literally even a monster that is probably one of the garbage tierest monsters in the game, literally has the ability to kill you if you're not careful. And those trash mobs that literally are easy because he's in World Tier 2, and I don't even know if he actually got to World Tier 3, but if he did get to World Tier 3 and he started fighting some of those trash mobs, he would realize that the trash mobs are only trash mobs because he's so powerful at this particular point. And the game puts you in your place relatively quickly once you start doing the nightmare sigils and the monsters outlevel you by many times, and even those little tiny trash mobs can kill you relatively easily once you hit over a certain number of levels above your character. I don't really like his entire argument here, and I think his entire argument here is terrible, because basically what he's trying to say is he wants the game to be completely unfair and completely unplayable from the get-go. He doesn't want any new character, he doesn't want any noob or any person who doesn't know how to play the game to actually be able to play the game, because he wants the game to be so difficult that literally everybody has trouble with it, from literally the level 1 character that you literally start the game with. He doesn't want you to be able to do the campaign without, like, extreme amounts of pain and, like, a stick going straight up your rectum. Like, it feels like he's in this world where he wants it to be really difficult, but he's not understanding that not everybody can handle that difficulty, that you have to ease players into a game. And many games have made this mistake, is that they put the difficulty so hard in the beginning that they chase off the majority of the population of the player base, because the players can't even figure out how to play the game, let alone get into it and actually enjoy it. When you ease them into the game, they learn the mechanics, and once they learn the mechanics, then they start to understand how to play the game, and then you throw the difficulty at them, which is exactly what Diablo 4 does. It gives you an easy part to play with first, and then ramps up the difficulty relatively quickly. World Tier 3 is a ramp-up, a very big ramp-up over World Tier 4, which he basically never played. And then World Tier 4 is a huge ramp-up over World Tier 3, and once you get into the higher Nightmare Sigils, it ramps up yet again into another difficulty spike. And granted, at certain points, you do feel powerful. But usually that comes down to you understanding how to play the game, not the game being too easy. So as your knowledge increases and as you understand the mechanics of the game, you literally just become better at the game. And you literally just become a better player as a result. So you attack the challenges with that greater knowledge, and you understand how to play better. But he's basically saying that, like what I'm seeing here from his review is that his skill level was above the campaign. So the entire time during the campaign, he was having issues because everything was so easy, and he was bored because his skill level is literally above the campaign, right? But he never went past the point where it would have actually gotten difficult. And I also don't really find his comment about most people haven't beaten the campaign even, like, remotely accurate, because I feel like most people on their first playthrough of any game are literally just going to enjoy the story. Like, he basically is saying he didn't really enjoy the story. He didn't really do any of the quests, and it looks like he was also skipping stuff as well. So, like, he literally at one point literally just said, I didn't fight anything on the way. I just started skipping monsters because who cares if I need to fight anything? He goes, there's going to be monsters where I get, so I'm just going to skip stuff. And he's literally fighting monsters like 10, 15 levels under-leveled because he's literally just skipping everything, right? So literally, he's already in a situation where he's not actually playing the campaign for what the campaign is for, which is the story. So he's in the campaign, which is all about the story. He's skipping the story, and then he's literally just hating on the fact that the campaign is made for the story, which is stupid. And then once he finally got out of the story, once he finally finished the story, he didn't really move on to the next difficulty setting, which was really quite strange.
World of Sanctuary. When I did finally get to Hell, there was a brief moment of excitement. I was like, oh, fuck yeah. I'm gonna start seeing some crazy ass enemies. And then it was the same demons I was fighting at the start of the game. Even the unique bosses aren't all that challenging. Take the Astaroth battle, it's built up quite a bit. I mean, you're fighting a Hell Knight riding a giant 5-headed demon dog. Talk about fucking epic. This should be a major checkpoint in the player's skills, and this guy should be a total badass. Instead, he's a cakewalk because of scaling difficulty. I made a video a long time ago about the most important thing every video game needs, and it's challenge. If I'm not challenged, you know, then I don't see a point. I don't see a point to playing the game, and that's how I feel about Diablo 4.
I mean, that's why games have easy, normal, hard, you know, very hard difficulty modes. That's why games have those difficulty modes in the first place, because not everybody has the same skill set. Not everybody is capable of playing the game at the same level. Some people always play games on hard difficulty. Some people always play games on, you know, easy difficulty, normal difficulty. Like, and the other thing is that how you approach the game has a lot to do with how difficult the game is. Like, a lot of the times when I play Diablo 2, I literally go out of my way to make the game more difficult for myself because I know that I want a more difficult title. And I feel like he's unfairly dogging on what is essentially the tutorial of the game, which is the campaign. He's literally dogging on the tutorial of the campaign and trying to say the tutorial of the campaign is too easy. Like, could you imagine if I booted up a game and during the tutorial, I'm just like, this is way too easy. Why is this so easy? Like, I don't understand. They're literally telling me what to do. They just told me to jump, and they just told me to duck. And look, they just told me to turn on my flashlight in the dark. They don't let me do anything. Like, it's the tutorial of the game. Like, if at the end of the day, you can't hate on the fact that they made the story available to the wider audience, which is literally everyone who picks up the game, whether it's a old grandma in her 90s who wants to play some Diablo 4, or it's a one-armed kid who literally has trying to play with a controller and has like a little attachment thing that he can hit with his elbow so he can use his attack. Like, whatever it may be, you can't hate on the fact that literally they're just making it available to the wider range of audience so that you can actually have like people play the game and not have to be like ridiculous uber epic like god tier players to get through everything. Like, that's one of the things I think that Dark Souls fails on the most, is that it eliminates a large percentage of its audience by just simply creating a very just difficult game from the get-go, which pushes a lot of people away. I think Dark Souls is an amazing like genre. I think the Elden Ring game is an amazing genre. But do I think that they push away a player base, a large portion of their player base, because of the artificial difficulty that they create in the beginning by making your character so under-leveled and then making the other monsters around you so over-leveled for no particular reason? And then once you solve that issue, the difficulty goes away. But for a brand new player who doesn't know any better, it causes them to basically go, oh, well, I don't want to play this game. It's too hard.
I might have been willing to grind to World Tier 3 and deal with the game's lack of difficulty up to that point if it weren't for the second crippling flaw, the skills. Now, at first I was...
So he basically just said in a nutshell that he never made it to World Tier 3. So let's just state this for a fact. He never made it to World Tier 3. All right, so this is from the perspective of somebody who never made it to World Tier 3. Never.
Having a blast with this game, and every time I leveled up, I was super pumped to spend the next 5 minutes looking at the skill tree and carefully considering what I would put my point in. I felt like...
Also, it doesn't even look like he even maxed out his character, by the way. So I think I also need to point this out. If he never got to World Tier 3, the chances are he never got to level 50. If he never got to level 50, then chances are he never got his full skill points from his renown, which means he probably also never had full skill points at all. So he was never a full... So at level 50, you are basically a fully functional character with all of your skill points, and at that point you start to work into the Paragon tree, which can change the way that your character works. But your skill tree is really the most important thing for your character. And he's basically admitting that he never really maxed out his character and never got his character to the point where his skill tree was fully developed.
Like my playstyle was constantly expanding until I unlocked my ultimate. Once you do that, the game becomes extremely repetitive as your playstyle is set in stone from then on, and you're only investing points in passive bonuses and stat increases. Sure, you can respec and swap out skills, but you're only allowed 5 abilities and a basic attack. Once you max these abilities out, you can only...
Wrong. You don't have to put the basic attack on there. That's already something that he's gotten wrong. You do not have to have a basic attack. There are tons of skills and characters that do not use a basic attack. I have a necromancer that does not use a basic attack. I have a freaking another necromancer, a corpse explosion necromancer that doesn't use a basic attack. Like, there's tons of characters that do not have to use a basic attack. That is just a misnomer.
Move laterally, not vertically. You can't expand your playstyle or your arsenal of tools. You can only swap things out. Does that make sense? Yes, this limitation does create trade-offs and forces players to think carefully about what to invest in and what type of playstyle they want. But I remember Diablo 2 doing this exact same thing and letting you have 8 abilities and a basic attack. And shit, 2 weapons you could swap between. Shit, man, even the original Diablo let you have, what, like 30 different abilities and magic spells? I guess this 5-skill limitation in Diablo 4 wouldn't bother me so much if it weren't so tedious to change builds, right? If you get to a super high level in Diablo 4 and decide to change your playstyle, you better have enough gold to change it back in case you hate it.
Okay, we're coming back to this because I was told that he said he doesn't pick up gold. So he's already complaining about literally the cost to refund your skills, and he's like, yeah, if you don't have enough gold, then you can't even do your respecs, which is stupid because everybody who plays the game on a regular basis usually has more than enough gold to respec their character. That's just how it works. I guess he doesn't have enough gold because he doesn't go back and pick any up. That's probably what's going on there. But I also want to touch on the fact that he's basically dogging on the fact that there's only 6 skill slots. So I think I need to touch on this for a second. The game is balanced around 6 skill slots. Anybody with half a brain, literally, who looks at the game, and I'm assuming that he's not one of them because he's literally complaining about the 6 skill slots. Anybody with half a brain would be able to see that if you had access to all of the skills on your tree, it would break the game. Like, I can say with 100% certainty that if I had access to every single skill that I wanted to have access to in Diablo 4, none of my characters would ever have any issues. I could literally just have a sorceress with all of the defensive skills, because why not? Why not have flame shield? Why not have teleport? Why not have ice armor? Why not have every single defensive skill? Because just if I can just have them all up there, then yeah, I'm just going to have every single defensive skill in existence, because it would be stupid not to. Like, there is no way that they are going to be able to just let us use any ability that we want to have on the tree without doing some serious rebalancing with the way that the game works. The game is balanced around those 6 skill slots. And if you start just making it so that we can utilize any skill that we want to, it's going to be absolutely ridiculous. Like, you're literally just, like, my Necromancer, he's just going to have his Bone Storm, he's going to have his Blood Mist, he's going to have both curses. I'll just have Decrepify and Iron Maiden, because why not? And I'll literally just have everything. And then, on top of that, they have items in the game that add plus to all skills, like the Harlequin Crest Shako, which gives +4 to all skills. Well, if I can have everything on my bar, why not put a point in literally everything, and then put my Harlequin Crest Shako on to make everything level 5. I think that people who don't understand that these 6 skill slots are literally how the game is balanced and complain that they don't have enough, don't really put a lot of thought into, like, what occurs if you have more than 6 skill slots. Like, really sit there and think about, like, how overpowered your character would be if you had access to every single ability on your character's bar. It would be just dumb, stupid, insane. Like, we're talking about a rogue that can literally dash, drop stun grenades, shadow step, like, literally everything that she can possibly do, caltrops, traps, like, literally to the point where she's just, like, clouding the screen with bombs and explosions on a regular basis. You would just be pressing every defensive cooldown that the frickin' rogue has, like, bar none. Like, why not have every single defensive cooldown? What is there, like, frickin' 8 defensive cooldowns on the frickin' the rogue at this particular point? Like, you literally have, like, Shadow Step, there's the Smoke Grenade, there's the Dash, you've got the one that turns you invisible, you've got, I mean, like, you could throw in Caltrops in there, you could throw on, like, a couple different core skills for, like, alternate use scenarios, you could just throw some points in there just to have them. Like, it doesn't make any sense, honestly, like, why someone wouldn't be able to see this, because it's the way the game is set up to the point where literally, like, you're forced to choose a specific number of abilities, yes, but the whole purpose of forcing you to choose a specific number of abilities is because if you had them all, you would be a god.
Because there is no loadout system, which I think would work if you could purchase, like, loadout slots and you could swap those out at the stash. I'd probably keep playing the game if that was a thing. But
I can agree with the loadout slots. Multiple loadouts would be nice. I could definitely get behind that. Having multiple loadouts for your characters could be cool.
Right now, it just feels like Diablo 4 is insistent on restricting the most fun aspects of its gameplay. Is it for balance? Balance for what? PvP? Who the fuck cares? WoW lets you use like 500 different abilities. Balance for PvE? That's a laugh. We just established the game is too easy up until you hit level 50. Maybe it's to force players to make trade-offs, and that seems more likely, but come on, man. It's boring.
A main cornerstone of D4 is play your way.
Between all of our different systems, you can really create a custom character in ways that was not available in previous Diablo titles.
You're a liar! You're a liar! In the eternal conflict between the high heavens and the burning hells, Diablo 4 offers you more choice than ever before.
This too is false.
Because we have all of these different ways to make your own character, there's a lot more possibility compared to previous titles of how you want to play, how you want to build your character.
Liar! You see, I had this fantasy of being a lightning-throwing, shape-shifting druid. I wanted to have a hybrid between those two builds, but I had to settle for just the lightning. Why can't we have more hotkeys? Is it a technical limitation?
You don't have to settle for just the lightning. You can totally make a lightning / shape-shifting character. It's straight up a thing. There's quite a few lightning builds at this particular point. One of the most powerful ones, which has literally cleared tier 100 dungeons, is literally the Storm Wolf that does like ridiculous amounts of damage and absolutely annihilates stuff. I mean, it's just ridiculously stupid how good that particular class is. And the fact that he stopped at level 50 and never found out about any of that, which, by the way, let's exemplify what he's missing out by stopping at level 50 in World Tier 3. He missed out on all the unique items, by the way. He missed out basically on the entire Paragon board, so didn't discover any of the customizability for the Paragon board at all. He never actually capped out his skill tree, so he never got all the skill points that he needed to actually cap out his character. He didn't find probably half the legendary aspects that he would have needed to complete this supposed build that he wanted to make. And the fact that he is literally here complaining that he couldn't make his Storm Wolf is probably the silliest thing in the world, because there's literally like 4 or 5 different builds that involve like mixing together the elements of like storm and shapeshifting, earth and shapeshifting, like that are like literally clearing content like no tomorrow.
Like because they're making the game for consoles too? Well, that doesn't make sense, because Dragon Age Origins, Fable, and other RPGs have had workarounds for that issue. But let's look at another top-down RPG that's also on console. Divinity Original Sin 2, one of the greatest video games ever made. You can invest points in the memory stat to unlock more skill slots. There's no limit, and you can do this with...
I can't believe you just said that Divinity 2 Original Sin was one of the greatest games ever made. I played that game. It was okay. Like, it was okay.
4 different characters. It's literally like that easy. Or at least it would be if when you leveled up, you can invest points in attributes, but you can't do that in Diablo until level 50. What the fuck? What were they thinking? Look, these are 2 radically different kinds of games, but the point is, as someone who's played a fuck ton of RPGs, I have a lot more fun with this than this. The limitations on skills and the backwards-ass design of scaling difficulty have basically...
So, I'm going to go back here for a second and actually highlight this, because he brings up the MMO panel. And, you know what? Instead of bringing up this image, let's bring up a different image, shall we? Let's bring up one of my MMO characters, because I actually have my screenshots from my old MMO days, like when I used to just play MMOs nonstop. And I feel like this is pertinent to what we're talking about. So this is my Final Fantasy 14 warrior. I'm pretty sure I have a picture of him somewhere here. So this is my warrior in Final Fantasy 14, and he has currently 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48 buttons to press. And granted, some of those are pets and things like that I like to call out. But having 48 buttons to press in an MMO is stressful. Actually, sorry, I missed some over here. 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60. It is not fun. This is not fun, okay? I've done the MMO thing. I've played MMOs for decades. Okay, I played Final Fantasy 11 for like 11 years. I played Final Fantasy 14, Final Fantasy 11. I played Lord of the Rings Online. I played tons of MMOs. That multi-button ridiculousness is not fun. I don't care who wants to say that's fun. Having 60 buttons that I need to learn and press on a regular basis is not fun. It is stressful and it is annoying and it hurts my pinky because I always have to hold down the control key all the time to press the upper row of buttons.
Diablo 4 is plagued by so many what the fuck were they thinking type of issues. It's almost comical.
What the fuck?
You know how when PC players play a first-person shooter and they lose their mind if they can't control the field of view? That's exactly how I felt playing Diablo 4. Like, bro, why is the camera so zoomed in? They got custom games in Warcraft 3 that let you zoom out further.
I mean, I will 100% agree. We need more zoom out further. 100% agree. I'm going to give them that. Like, it is 100% something that should be done, is we should be able to zoom our character out further, and I don't know why it currently is not. And that one is a very big negative in my opinion, and everybody has complained about that. I don't think there's a single person that I've talked to that hasn't complained about that so far.
Than what the base game lets you. Dude, zooming out is one of the biggest features they flaunted when they were promoting StarCraft Remastered. I just don't get it. Look, I'll show you, okay? Here's the FOV in the original. Character ain't too big, looks great. Here's Diablo 2, same thing. Even Diablo 3 somehow got this right. And then, well, what the fuck? Throughout my playthrough, I kept spamming the scroll button in vain, hoping it would zoom out, but it never does.
All the time. All the time spamming the scroll wheel. All the time. I constantly feel like I have to spam the scroll wheel constantly.
Wait, hold the fucking phone. You can zoom out? I've been playing for 20 hours and now when I'm in hell near the end of the goddamn game, it can finally zoom out? Why couldn't I play the rest of the game like this? Why does it only zoom out at parts where the developers want to show off the level design? The level design's beautiful, by the way. Why do I even have to complain about this? It just shouldn't be an issue. Just let me zoom out. I figure we might as well discuss the side content Diablo offers. Well, most of it is pretty fun initially, like the dungeons, some side quests have interesting bits of story, and the strongholds are fun, lengthy battles. But these activities get...
He literally just said earlier in this video that the side quests were boring and he didn't like them, and that basically that the game, the world felt empty. He's literally contradicting himself in his own statement, because he literally earlier was like, the world feels empty and there's no point to it and it's just aimless and you go wherever you want to and nothing matters. And now he's actually saying that some of the side quests are actually good. He's just double backing on what he already said earlier.
Old real quick. It's pretty obvious they had a quantity over quality mentality to ensure there was a lot of content for players to grind and complete. So there's 5 main areas in the game, and by completing the side content you earn renown, which lets you unlock important things like extra skill points, more potion capacity. It's pretty much necessary to max these things out after you beat the campaign. Problem is, once again, as a result of the live service, Blizzard intends to reset the renown you've earned with every season. Why is this a problem?
Okay, well, we've already gone over this. People have complained. They reacted. We actually got a meaningful change on this. So I'm assuming that he hasn't actually heard about any of the stuff that they've been changing for this, because it looks like he's about to complain about the same thing that everybody complained about. And literally the development team reacted almost immediately, by the way, to the massive outpouring of like, hey, we don't want to have to do this again, and changed it. So let's listen to what he has to say about the thing that's already been changed.
Because most Diablo fans fucking hated grinding for it.
I don't know why they are holding on to the idea that refarming renown will be fun. I don't want to do the same side quests again. They're fucking annoying and they're a waste of time. I don't want to have to re-clear the same pointless dungeons for no reason.
You've probably seen people say stuff like, if I don't want to have to grind renown again, if I have to grind renown again, I'm not playing anymore. And I'm sitting over here thinking to myself, so if the side content is that bad, if it's so boring that you never want to experience anything like it ever again, then that's not content, dude.
He just contradicted himself again. He literally just said, like, the first part of the video, he's like, the side content is terrible and I didn't like it. Then he actually said that the quests were actually interesting and he actually had fun doing quite a few of the quests. And now he's back again to like, he just did like a full 360 and then a full 360 again. Now he's basically saying the side content, he doesn't want to do it again because it wasn't very good. How do you contradict yourself 3 times, like, in the same video?
Those are chores. You're at the grocery store right now, checking off a list. You know, maybe these activities are worth re-examining and redesigning to make grinding renown a fun experience so that players are open to doing that again. In the promotional videos, Blizzard kept reiterating how much content there is, and that players will never run out of things to do.
It's been created to feel full of things to encounter, full of secrets to discover, full of characters to interact with, full of stories to find.
You have so many activities that you might run into.
Diablo 4 offers so much more for players to do than ever before.
We've really crafted the world to feel like there's always something just around the corner to find.
Every single time you come back to play Diablo 4, there's going to be new stuff for you to experience.
There's over 120 dungeons to play through and find.
We've got almost 150 dungeons in the game.
There's going to never be an absence of something to do.
It's really just going to be a way to keep coming back and experiencing more Diablo 4.
It's usually a red flag when I hear developers talk like this, because what they're actually trying to say, if you translate it, is our game is going to have endless amounts of boring, tedious, and shallow activities. They focus on...
So I'm going to touch on this for a second. I know this video is already like freaking an hour long, but endless content is always something that developers have chased for as long as time immemorial. Okay, endless content is something that is a pipe dream, and yes, it doesn't really truly exist except for in PvP. PvP is probably the only true endless content that exists within any video game, because PvP is going up against people, and people are endless content. Like, you can fight the same person 100 times, and as long as that person isn't just pressing the same buttons monotonously, they may offer you a different challenge the second time you fight them, or the third, or the fourth, until eventually it gets to the point where you guys are an even match because you are learning and growing off of each other and becoming better as you play. So PvP represents the true ultimate endless content, and I have participated in PvP endless content on quite a few occasions, like in Lord of the Rings Online, which is amazing. And I think the most important thing for you to understand is that yes, developers are always going to try to hit that endless content loop, because that's just amazing. If you have to make content constantly on a regular basis, you have to put out new content, new book after new book after new book after new book. Like, it's basically the result of just endless and endless hours of content. So, of course, developers are going to try to find ways to occupy you that doesn't involve them creating an endless loop of content. Randomized variables and things like that are a very common way to do this. Diablo 2 did it. Diablo 3 did it. Diablo 4 does it. Many games do the randomized content variables. Nightmare Sigils are an example of this. There are multiple different variables that come into play when you do Nightmare Sigils, right? So Nightmare Sigils in general have a specific function, which is to provide you with random variables, which then also create a dungeon, which can be difficult or spicy in different ways. Like, you know, like going to Taco Bell one day and then going to a Mexican restaurant the next, and then going to like an Indian food place the next day. Like, yeah, you're still eating food, but it's differently spiced, and maybe it's even the same exact food. Like, a lot of people have probably never really thought about this, but a taco is kind of the same thing as a burger. They both contain meat, they both contain cheese, they both have lettuce on them, they both have some sort of bun wrapped around them. One's made of corn and one's made of flour, but at the end of the day, they contain the same ingredients. They're just wrapped in a different package and presented to you in a different way and spiced differently so that you can, you know, your taste buds have something fun to bite into. So I can hardly blame Diablo 4 for trying to represent some infinite content. But there's also story content there too. It's not just endlessly grinding. There's also stories that you can partake in, quests that you can do. There's interesting things that you can find, like little tidbits spread all throughout the world that I've actually had a lot of fun reading, like the story of Inarius and Lilith. Like when you go into the room with Rathma and the freaking giant snake Trangul is there. Like, there's tons of really cool things in this game that I have enjoyed story-wise. And will that last me forever? No. The answer to the question is you can only read a book so many times before you literally know every single line in the book, to the point where you know what somebody's going to say before they even say it. But if you don't also have this content that randomizes itself and allows you to grind almost endlessly, then there's nothing left to do. Eventually, you will run out of content, and that's just how it works. No, I feel like he's almost making it out to be that the developers are not gods who can make infinite content on demand. And, like, of course they can't. Like, there's no way to make infinite content. It doesn't exist. But when you play a game like Skyrim, for instance, there's tons of content throughout the world, and the content changes depending on how you play the game. So, like, you might pick one, Skyrim playthrough and travel north, and you get lots of cool quests. And maybe you've done those quests before, but maybe you never did them in that order. And that also changes things, is like what order you actually do things in. And I think that's a really cool thing that they did with Diablo 4, is they enabled you to kind of do things in whatever order you wanted. Like when you start out in Fractured Peaks, you move to the next act, and you don't necessarily have to stay in Act 2 or Act 3 or Act 4. You can travel around the world doing whatever the hell you want, kind of the same way that you do in Skyrim, just picking up quests, talking to NPCs, and just having fun with it. Or you can follow the campaign and you can move along behind, what they're doing. But, like, the way that they have it set up is actually pretty cool. And I also like the fact that the level scaling, which he complained about in ad nauseum, about the level scaling being a problem, the level scaling actually creates another interesting side effect, which is basically that content actually becomes more playable, not less playable. So in World of Warcraft, which was his example, when you go back and you fight those little boars on the starter island and you annihilate them from existence because they're level 1, when you go back and you do quests at a high level, and the quests are all low-level quests, you just breeze through them as if they're absolutely nothing, and there's no challenge involved whatsoever, right? So having the level scaling there actually creates an interesting situation where you can go back and do a starter quest, something that's a lower level, and still get a little bit of enjoyment out of it, which I actually found really fun. And I actually told people in the kinship, I remember saying this, I said it's actually more fun to level up my character first and then go back and do these quests at a higher level because they're more challenging and they're more fun that way.
It's on the scale of content instead of its quality. They prioritize the grind instead of the fun, the exciting, and the new. I don't know, man. I guess I just don't get it. I don't understand the appeal of having my progress and my character reset every few months, and then having the devs try to pass it off as a feature and not a corrupt save file.
So going toward that as well, like he basically just made this big deal about there not being infinite content within the game, and at the same time just poo-pooed that content. So seasons represent a form of infinite content. It is essentially every single 3 months you get new content, a new story, new things to do with your character, and it represents something that you can challenge yourself with in a continual fashion. So no matter how many times you've played the game, when you come back for a new season, there's always something new there for you to experience. And he basically just spent a long time, like, talking about how bad it was that the game was grindy and didn't have the good content, but then poo-pooed the new content as soon as it was coming out. Like, oh, there's a new season, it has new content, well, screw you, because I don't want to play the new season.
Getting to level 40 and saving up enough money to buy a mount in WoW Classic was a big deal. I felt so accomplished after I did that, and that I could explore the world much more efficiently. But more importantly, Blizzard didn't take my mount away after 3 months and say, go do all that shit again, asshole.
No, they didn't take your mount away. They just took away all of your equipment. They took away basically everything that you had, your raid gear. They made all of it basically pointless every 3 months, and then forced you to go grind out new gear because they increased the item power level, put a new raid boss in with new raid gear that you then had to go grind out again. No, they didn't take away your mount. No, they didn't take away your mount, but they took away everything else. So congratulations. You got to keep your mounts. You got to keep your mount, and you got to keep your stupid little trophies and the things that you have in your stash and maybe your transmog items. But they basically took away everything else from you. Not a big difference at all. Totally not the same at all as seasons. Totally not the same.
What's next on the agenda? Stats and loot, the bread and butter of most RPGs, and the main reason people play them for hundreds of...
Oh, and by the way, they do take away your mount. So I'm not completely oblivious to World of Warcraft, and I remember that during one of the expansions, they literally restricted flying mounts in the new zone. So they did actually take away your mount.
of hours. On some occasions, you do get a nice reward for completing a quest or defeating a boss, like this amulet that summons a barrier or the Mother's Embrace ring you get from Lilith, but these are extremely rare in the campaign. Now,
they're extremely rare in the campaign. They're not. Did he just say that the legendary items are extremely rare in the campaign? Now, the unique item is rare because guess what? You don't find unique items in World Tier 1 and World Tier 2. Something he would know if he made it to World Tier 3 and actually started leveling up, because he would have found tons of unique items, because as everyone knows who's made it to World Tier 3, you start finding massive amounts of uniques. It's not necessarily the uniques you want. It's not necessarily good uniques. Like, sometimes you find Fields of Crimson 15 times, like Leonarch, or you find freaking, like, 15 blood artisan curioses like myself, but you will be finding them, and they are not rare. Like, they are really not rare, except for the uber rare items, and that's a completely different story.
That might just be me, but I find the majority of loot drops in Diablo 4 to be terribly unexciting, to the point where I hardly read what most items actually do. And at a certain point, I just walk past chests because they rarely hold anything of interest. I think the loot is extremely boring for a few reasons. Number one,
he walks by chests. He doesn't read any loot. The loot is boring. He doesn't pay attention to the stats on the items. Man, he's going to have a hard time in the higher tiers of the game. He's going to have a very hard time if he's not paying attention to rare items and the stats that are on those rare items. This guy is going to get smoked in World Tier 3. He ain't even going to make it to World Tier 4.
Number one, it all looks extremely generic. Maybe it's because I'm playing as a druid and just the druid items are boring, but when I...
Not a single sacred, not a single ancestral item in that entire pile of stuff that he just showed off. He just showed us off a pile of garbage. He just showed us the worst loot, basically, in the entire game. And, yeah, you know what? All that stuff you sell to the NPC. And if he was playing World Tier 3 right now, he would literally be rolling in sacred items, and they would be way more powerful than what he's got. And he's got, like, all the gems in here, too, that are garbage tier gems. Like, I don't even know why they're in his inventory. They should be in his stash, but whatever.
Look at the...
But this is the guy that doesn't pick up gold, but he picks up the crude gems off the ground that literally most people in the game won't even touch. These tier of gems are not even worth picking up once you get to World Tier 3. Like, it's literally to the point where you just throw you just don't even pick them up. You just leave them on the ground where they belong. You don't bring them back to town. You don't sell them because they're literally worth like 2 gold. Like, at that. They're basically 2 gold.
Loot in Diablo 1 and 2, it just looks way fucking cooler. You got like the skull shield.
Now, this is something that I will agree with him on, and I will agree with him on 9,000%. I think the iconography of Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 is leagues better than the iconography of Diablo 4. For some reason or another, they went from like amazing icons that just looked absolutely freaking awesome to just like the worst looking icons that you could barely even tell you have an item in your inventory, with huge sockets that cover up the artwork. So any artwork that is actually there in Diablo 4, for some reason or another, they decided, well, you don't need to see it. Let's just put giant sockets over top of it so you can't even see the artwork that we created. And it's really silly, and it's definitely something that I'll agree with him on.
Or Arcane's Valor. I mean, look at the helmets and how colorful and different they are. But in Diablo 4, when I find a pair of boots, I feel like it's the same fucking pair of boots I've already seen 100 times. Am I the only one who feels this way? Am I missing something? Am I tripping? You know, maybe it also has to do with the fact that every item takes up the same amount of space and the icons all look so similar that in my brain, it all morphs together. There are very few moments where finding a piece of loot is genuinely exciting in Diablo 4. And part of that is because I'm also not a huge fan of RPGs that dump a bunch of meaningless numbers and stats into the menu and equipment. Remember how awesome it was in WoW when you got that first item that boosted your stats instead of just armor?
Oh, dude, 4 strength, 4 stam, leather belt. Level 18.
I think part of the reason this clip became a meme is his excitement mirrored our excitement. And that was for a belt that he found at level 18. I have never been even close to this excited for any item in Diablo 4. When appraising the value of an item in an RPG, it really helps to understand the game's mechanics and what certain stats actually improve. If the stats and numbers are too convoluted, then players aren't going to understand or feel any tangible.
I don't feel like the stats are currently too convoluted, with the exception of resistances, which is just, I don't even know why the hell that system even exists. I feel like most of the stats in the game are pretty self-explanatory, and most people who have played an MMO or any kind of ARPG at all can usually figure out most of this stuff with just by using their brain. The only thing that really kind of like bothers me is the resistances, because the resistances are garbage, and most of us know to build resistances from games like Diablo 2. And like, I think we all fell into that trap when we started playing Diablo 4, which is we started building resistances, and then we realized resistances were absolute garbage because of the way they have the resistances set up within the system. But I do feel like for the most part, when it comes to damage, at the very least, like, it's not really all that complicated to understand. It doesn't take a genius to build a character that can clear World Tier 3. World Tier 4 gets a little bit more spicy, but again, it doesn't take a genius to clear World Tier 4. Like, the only time that min-maxing these stats even really becomes all that important is when you're pushing Nightmare Sigils, and that's the point at which you really need to focus on, like, what gear that you're wearing and what stats are on the piece of equipment. But, like, World Tier 4... like Nightmare Sigils is where things get spicy, like and where you have to actually set up your character correctly. For the most part, when it comes to equipment, you can literally just like put on whatever you think is good, and your character will still probably do pretty well. Like, I literally have taken like level 54 characters, put like garbage equipment on them, re-rolled a couple of the stats here or there, like set up the legendary effects right, and was able to kill like level 74 monsters with this character that was utilizing basically garbage tier equipment. Like, I don't quite understand like where he's coming from when it comes to this at all.
Benefit from increasing them, right? Again, you look at items in WoW, it's like plus 17 stamina. What does plus 1 stamina do? Plus 10 HP. Okay? You can easily wrap your head around that. But because the sense of progression in Diablo 4 is so fucking skewed, now you find an item that's like plus 9 to all stats. And you're like, what the fuck? That sounds awesome. I'm only level 20. And then you'll look at what 1 point of strength does, and what does it do?
All stats is actually pretty good, by the way. Before he bashes the crap out of all stats and you guys get the wrong impression, all stats is actually pretty darn good. It is something that allows you to activate Paragon slots on your Paragon board, and it gives you just, like, in general, like, a lot more than, like, an individual stat does. Yeah, it's not your main stat, and it might not necessarily be, like, super crazy, but when you're looking at your Paragon board and you have, like, a glyph that requires, like, 500 dexterity, guess what? Those all stats are actually pretty darn important.
Gives you 1 point of armor. Okay, well, I have 3,000 points of armor, so this is worthless to me. I can't get over this. Like, strength doesn't improve your damage or nothing? What does strength typically do in an RPG? You want to use this big-ass weapon? Strength...
Is he really coming after main stats from a game that literally uses main stats? Like, he keeps using WoW as an example, and doesn't WoW also use main stats? I can't believe you just rewound my video, Dusty Buns. I'm literally in the middle of trying to do this, sir, and you're just messing me up. You're messing me up, turd face. Stop it, Mr. NiNi. I know you don't want to listen to this guy. Shush. But isn't WoW literally using main stats like all other MMOs are these days? It was something that I didn't like. I really don't like main stats as a feature within games, but I'm pretty sure that Lord of the Rings was using main stats when I left. Final Fantasy XIV uses main stats. Like, I'm pretty sure WoW is using main stats as well, which is basically where, like, oh look, I'm a warrior, I build strength because I am warrior, her. And there's, like, no brain work to it whatsoever, because once the main stat thing came into place, it was just, like, the dumbest thing ever, because now you don't even have to think about how you build your character. You don't have to think about what piece of equipment you need on. You just go, okay, I'm a warrior, I need strength. I'm a warlock, I need intelligence. I'm a rogue, I need dexterity. And that's literally it. And you just stack dexterity like to the moon and back until literally your character is godlike, because you have 17 trillion dexterity and you've got like 1 strength, 1 intelligence, and 1 wisdom. And like the main stat thing that's come into video games at this particular point is just been copied and pasted onto Diablo. Yes, having some of the other stats is kind of nice, but in Diablo 4, the same way as all the other main stat games, you look at the stats and you can literally, like, it doesn't take someone who's it doesn't take a large amount of intelligence to figure this out. You hold your mouse over them, figure out what they do, and before you know it, you're like, okay, that's my main stat. I'm a barbarian. Look, strength is my main stat. I'm a necromancer. Look, intelligence is my main stat. I'm a rogue. Look, dexterity is my main stat. I'm a druid. Look, wisdom is my main stat. And it doesn't really take a whole lot of effort to see that.
This is worthless to me. I can't get over this. Like, strength doesn't improve your damage or nothing? What does strength typically do in an RPG? You want to use this big-ass weapon? Strength requirement. You want to do more damage? Strength. Bro, even in Warcraft 3, the strength stat did more than what it does in Diablo 4, and that wasn't even an RPG. I've never played an RPG like this where the core stats felt so fucking useless, so meaningless to increase. This is apparently what the entire Paragon board is all about. Yeah.
Which he never made it to, by the way. So honestly, anything he says about the Paragon board at this point is like pointless, because he never actually made it to the Paragon board. He literally told us he got to level 48, which is 2 levels underneath of the Paragon board, and now he's going to talk about something that he never touched.
And let's talk about that shit. How do you balance a game that has skill trees this big by making each point basically worthless? Diablo 1 did it better. I cannot for the life of me understand what they were thinking. The reason I bring all this up is because so many of the stats on items just, I look at it and I'm like, well, this doesn't mean anything to me, or it doesn't feel important. League of Legends champion design suggests that giving players fewer but more meaningful passives is far more desirable than a bunch of passives that offer minimal changes, because you're not going to notice most of this shit at all, especially when the enemies are scaling with you. There's so many different damage modifiers, you know, complex number calculations like damage to close enemies, damage to distant enemies. Well, where's the stat for damage to enemies at a moderate distance? Why don't you have that as well? Why is it necessary to have like 8 different stats to calculate how much damage something does? Why do resistances reduce incoming physical damage as well as magical damage? It's just like, I just think this is like the worst stat system I've ever seen in an RPG. It defies belief to me. So again, going back to the original, enemies didn't respawn and levels were finite, so you were encouraged to kill everything, pick up every item, and sell the shit you weren't using. You could sometimes buy a really good item with gold, and in the later stages purchase elixirs to boost stats, and of course stock up on potions. But Diablo games, in my opinion, even the first 2, always had a way of making gold feel kind of worthless. That has never been more apparent than in Diablo 4. It's like you'd only have 2 options: buy the shittiest gear you'll never.
Did he just say that gold is worthless in this game? Did he really just say that? Like, I feel like I need to go back a little bit and re-listen to that, because I can't honestly believe my ears of what I just heard.
Than in Diablo 4. It's like you'd only have 2 options: buy the shitty. Always had a way of making gold feel kind of worthless. That has never been more apparent than in Diablo 4. It's like,
this boy literally just said that gold. Not only did he say gold was useless, but he said it's never been more apparent that gold is useless in Diablo 4. Can I touch on this for a minute on how absolutely and utterly wrong this is? Like, to the point where it's literally so wrong that he might as well have just walked out into the great freaking American Northwest, pointed up at the sky, and just said, the sky is orange. Can't you guys see? The sky is orange. Like, that is literally how wrong that statement is. He's literally just walking out and pointing at something that everybody can clearly see, and just like completely spouting a lie. So let me touch on this and talk to you about how important gold is in this game, and literally why you need gold so much to do just about everything. And I feel like there's so much. Okay, so first off, gold is extremely important for extracting aspects. Rerolling items. So rerolling enchantment on items is a really big thing, which is something that you have to do on a regular basis. You also need gold for upgrading your crafting materials. You need gold for upgrading your items. You need gold for just about everything that you do, like within Diablo 4. Like every single thing that I'm doing, like converting one gem type to another, or adding a, and actually I'm not even sure adding a socket has gold attached to it, but it does require scattered prisms. Like literally going to the occultist and doing anything over there, like adding an aspect to an item, extracting an aspect from an item, enchanting an item, going over to the blacksmith where you literally have to repair your equipment on a regular basis. Like, there's so many freaking things that require gold that literally we have had characters literally spending like 200 million plus gold just to try and respec their character multiple times to try and figure out what kind of build they want to do. I literally, in my video earlier today, was literally just talking about how I burned like 50 million gold in a matter of like 10 minutes trying to reroll a couple items for one of my brand new characters. The idea that gold is not important in this game is so ridiculously and patently false that I honestly cannot believe he actually said that.
Like, you'd only have two options: buy the shittiest gear you'll never use for dirt cheap, or drop all of your money on one overpowered item. I hate having...
And let's talk about those items in the shop that he was highlighting, right? So one thing that you can actually do, and this is a tip for you guys, is if you check the shop on a regular basis, sometimes you will find items in there that are higher item power than 820, which means you can actually find like 823 item power items in that shop. And if you're careful and you pay attention, you can actually buy things from that shop for like 10, 20 million gold that are literally better than things that you can find. Those shops are slept on at this particular moment because a lot of people don't understand that those shops can actually obtain best-in-slot equipment, literally best-in-slot equipment for your character, but they don't know that because they're not actually checking the shop, and he doesn't know that because he never made it past level 48.
Having just these two choices. So when you keep checking the shop inventory in Diablo 4 and it's never anything good, or it's something that requires you to drop all your money so you can't respec, you just stop checking. This blows my mind. The entire concept of purchasing items and equipment in an RPG is superfluous. That's a big fucking problem. I never once...
So you never bought items in Diablo 2? Like, literally some of the best items that you can get in Diablo 2 are purchasable. Like, you can literally shop like 320 gloves. Like, there's a bunch of different items that you can shop in Diablo 2 that are like among some of the best items that you can have for your character, like Warcry sticks, all sorts of various things in Diablo 2 that you would literally shop. And I've no freaking clue what he's even talking about. Even in Diablo 1, if you went to work enough times, you could shop for a King's Sword of Haste. You would eventually get an amazing sword from him, and you would shop it. Yeah, I don't think I ever actually found a King's Sword of Haste. I always shopped the King's Sword of Haste. And I think in my Diablo 1 playthrough that I had a little while back, if you guys want to check that out on my channel, I actually shopped a King's Mace of Haste, which was basically just a slightly different version of the King's Sword of Haste. It was pretty darn good, and it carried me through that game, which I was super excited about.
In my entire playthrough, purchased a piece of equipment from a store. You know, sure, I did things like upgrade my potions or craft elixirs or upgrade my gear, but I never bought anything. In fact, this item has more item power, but the ring I currently have equipped has higher resistances. So, like, why the fuck would I ever buy this? Or that? Or that? Imagine creating an RPG where the in-game currency feels worthless. At one point, I stopped trying to pick up gold entirely if it was 2 seconds out of my way. And again, because
This boy is in for some hard awakening if he ever levels his character past level 48, because this boy is going to be wishing he picked up every single penny that he had. He going to be searching the couch cushions. He going to be pulling them couch cushions out and searching them couch cushions for coins. That's literally what this boy is going to be doing, because once he gets to the point where he actually needs all that gold, he's going to be smacking himself in the head and calling himself an idiot for not picking it up.
the value of items scales and everything is progressively getting more and more expensive, I feel like I'm only able to afford 1 or 2 items at any particular store. So I'm not about to drop all my cash on something that I'm just going to end up outscaling in an hour or 2. I think you've royally fucked up the in-game currency when taking 3 seconds to double back and pick up a pile of gold feels like a waste of time. So many facets of this game feel superfluous to me, and I'm not saying they are superfluous, that's just how they feel to me. So in a nutshell, my playstyle eventually developed into Okay, I'm skipping chests because those are worthless. I run through all combat in the open world because it's unnecessary. If gold isn't in my path, I don't go back for it. I skip through sections of dungeons so I can complete them faster. I skip dialogue and side quests so I can grind the renown faster. I don't go into the cellars anymore, and it's just like, dude, I'm just skipping the game. I'm just skipping past all this shit. This is the game. All right, Diablo 4, you've got one last chance to redeem yourself, and that's with this story. Is it any good? Well, I'm pleased to say that the opening cutscene is pretty fucking awesome. It begins with some grave robbers who are in way over their heads. They stumble across a power, the likes of which they can't even comprehend. And immediately the game establishes that sense of terror and fear that was sorely lacking in Diablo 3. Then your character arrives in a town, you clear a dungeon of demons out for them, you head back and start celebrating with the townsfolk when all of a sudden, oh shit, you're poisoned. This guy
That cutscene's amazing, by the way. It's a very good cutscene.
brings you to a shack where they perform some kind of satanic human sacrifice ritual, and it's like, okay, all right. You got me invested. So while there are some decent moments here and there, after the introduction, the story takes a fucking nosedive like Amelia Earhart. The beginning and end of Diablo 4 are the game's strongest parts, narratively, likely because there are only 2 pre-rendered cutscenes that sandwich the rest of the story. Almost everything that happened in the middle is just a blur to me, which is strange because the setup for the plot is
because you literally told us that you skipped pretty much all of the dialogue and you avoided any of the cutscenes. Like, this boy literally just told us, like, not 2 minutes ago, that literally he went through the process of skipping just about anything that didn't pique his interest, walking by packs of monsters, avoiding chests, not picking up gold, skipping dialogue options, and literally going past all the cutscenes. This boy literally just told us that he skipped the majority of the game, and now he's trying to tell us that he actually watched all the story. Which is it? What is this? Schrödinger skip? Like, he simultaneously skipped everything in the game and simultaneously didn't skip everything in the game, both at the same time?
very interesting. You've got Lilith and Inarius, an angel and a demon who created Sanctuary. This is the first time we've seen like an archangel and a demon form some kind of an alliance. They seem to be the only entities on each faction with a desire to end the war between heaven and hell, or at least escape it. One of the major issues with the story is the parts that don't include Lilith, Mephisto, or Inarius are terribly mundane. Characters are swapping in and out, and they get killed off, you know, the scene.
By the way, completely unrelated to this video, I hated Nariel. Nariel was one of the worst characters I've ever seen in any freaking MMO or game or any story like whatsoever. She was always doing something stupid. She was always running away. She was always just in the middle of trouble for no reason. And even at the end, she literally still manages to do something stupid. The entire time I was playing the story, all I wanted to do was be like, Nariel, just stay still for 3 seconds. We got this. We'll figure this out. Like, just don't run away and do something stupid. And what did she always do? She ran away and did something stupid, and it was just like her whole character was literally just, I'm gonna run away and do stupid things. And she did it all the time and at every opportunity, and it was just absolutely obnoxious. This character, like, I just do not like this character. And, you know, it's kind of surprising because every other character I actually enjoyed. I actually liked all the other characters. This one, though, I did not.
After they're introduced, some of them I even forget their name, like this guy who was in the tree. Nafane, I totally forgot he existed until I went back and watched my own footage. I think Diablo 4's story is further proof to me that Blizzard's style of writing has deteriorated severely in the last decade. You know, if you compare the...
Can I just stop here for a second and say, he didn't mention Vigo. Like, he did not mention Vigo at all. Vigo is one of the most, like, engaging stories, I think, in the entire thing. I don't care about the rest of it. Like, you know, whatever. Narius, Lilith, all that other stuff. But the story with Vigo in the Fractured Peaks was actually amazing. And when Vigo sacrifices himself at the end to save your life, like, I legit felt that. Like, I was like, oh, man, Vigo, you didn't have to do that. But my buddy, fam, like, you didn't you didn't have to do that. Like, I would have been all right. Like, you didn't have to sacrifice your life for me. That was like, and you literally, like, you're like, rest in peace, Vigo. Like, it's serious business, like, at that point. And they captured me from the very beginning. Like, I don't understand what he's talking about at all, because, like, some of the characters in the story, and the fact that he's not even mentioning Vigo, which was one of the strongest stories, literally, of this game so far, is literally watching Vigo sacrifice his life for you, was, like, very, very amazing, in my opinion. And this boy didn't even mention poor Vigo's name. Rest in peace, Vigo.
The end of act cinematics in Diablo 2 to 4, I mean, it's a major difference.
Now, we are truly alone. The creators of Sanctuary, Angel and Demon, Father and Mother, are dead.
I heard later that he was defeated. And that the Soul Stones were destroyed in Hellforge. All except one.
The big difference is in Diablo 2, they actually show the events that Marius, the narrator, is talking about, as opposed to just like some boring static shots of like a horse walking through the snow. It's why I seen like this.
Lilith and Astaroth had made a deal, and we were the ones who would pay the cost.
Is nowhere near as interesting or engaging as this.
Take it. Take it, take it. I'm glad this is finally over, Tyrael.
Everything happened exactly as Lilith wanted. We just danced to her music.
It's why I'm more interested in this.
Oh, I failed, Tyrael. I couldn't do as you asked.
And not so much this.
Donan was shattered. His mind on grief, not her. Not answers.
Look what the stone has
done to me. I mean, I feel like I do need to stop here and just simply say, Diablo 2 screw it, freaking, like, cutscenes were amazing. All right, like, Diablo 2's cutscenes were amazing. And I don't think anyone is ever going to say that Diablo 2 didn't have, like, some of the most amazing cutscenes in the world. Like, you're basically comparing, like, the best of the best of the best, like the 1%, like the creme de la creme, to a brand new game that only just started. And I will say this, and this is very important for a game like this, which is going to have stories that continue over the seasons. They've made it very apparent that we don't even have the full story. Like, we don't even have everything that's going on. We haven't seen every cutscene. We don't know all of the stuff that's going to be happening. And every single time they put out a new season, every single time they put out an expansion, which they actually said they're going to be putting out multiple expansions, by the way, they're going to be new cutscenes. There's going to be new stuff. Like, we're comparing the end of Diablo 2 Resurrected, and by the way, he's comparing the remastered Diablo 2 Resurrected cutscenes to Diablo 4, not the original Diablo 2 cutscenes, which the original Diablo 2 cutscenes were good, but they were not that good. Like, you're talking about a cutscene that was made, like, back in 2000 that got remastered in 2021, wasn't it? Or 2021? Like, got remastered in 2021 with, like, 4K resolution and, like, brand new graphics and everything. Like, going off of the old cutscene to make it better. Like, it's kind of hard to compare that because you're talking about literally a game that got a huge facelift to the new version. Like, I feel like he would have been better off showing the original versions, and then we'd have a much more much more interesting comparison, because the original cutscenes were nowhere near as good as the Diablo 2 Resurrected cutscenes, graphically at least. Although thematically, I will give it to them that thematically the Diablo 2 Resurrected cutscenes are amazing. And I feel like we've got that kind of stuff going on in Diablo 4, just not to the same degree that we have in Diablo 2. Like, I really feel like they need to bump up the amazing cutscenes that we get in Diablo 4, which I think we're going to get with each expansion and also with the seasons. We're probably going to get some pretty cool cutscenes every single time they release something new. So it's kind of hard to judge that so soon, because we don't know whether or not we're going to be getting, like, the most amazing cutscenes in the world soon, or if they're just going to, freaking phone it in.
Playing Diablo 4 is like dating a pretty woman. The kind that the longer you talk to her, the more you realize she has the personality of a tampon. Wide as an ocean, deep as a puddle. Yes, there are hundreds of NPCs in several different towns, but the world design of Diablo 4 is a byproduct of the gameplay, less so the story. Now, what do I mean by that? What are those words that are coming out of your mouth, Act Man? Let me explain. The open world isn't there to service some kind of overarching or branching narrative. It's to create a big-ass map that the developers can litter with tons of activities to keep players busy and keep them grinding. You might have noticed that...
I mean, I completely disagree, because the grind is the nightmare sigils. The grind is like finding equipment. The grind is building your characters. The grind is theory crafting. The grind is not the world. The world actually has pretty expansive and interesting things to explore and discover. And if he wasn't skipping every single dialogue and avoiding every single monster and literally walking past every single chest and thing to do within the world, he probably wouldn't feel that way, because quite a few of the quests have been extremely interesting and very rewarding to go through. And there's actually been quite a few of those quests that I want to go through multiple times, which is saying a lot.
Almost none of the optional dungeons in this game have any sort of story or history behind them. What I find the most immersive game world...
Which is also a lie, because there are quite a few quests, which he skipped all the dialogue on, by the way. So there are quite a few quests and quite a few various things going on that literally he is avoiding, because he is going through the process of skipping everything. So he didn't come across like the Bear Tribe quest, where you actually go into the Bear Tribe dungeon and you actually like save the Bear Tribe by taking out the guy who's stuck in there who has like some sort of demon inside of him, and you help the Bear Tribe leader do the thing. Like it's so silly, because there are so many quests that lead you into dungeons and literally act as actual story for those dungeons, that the only thing I can think is that he must have avoided doing basically all quests, because there are so many quests that take you into dungeons that he had to have been skipping them to not run into them.
Worlds are those that tell a story while I'm playing through them. Now, if you want to understand what's so wrong with Diablo 4's world, we need to look back at the first game, because it's the polar opposite of everything Diablo 4 is trying to be. I think Blizzard knows that Tristram is the most memorable location in the series, because in every sequel they find a reason to take you back there. Thing is, Blizzard doesn't seem to understand why Tristram is such an iconic and memorable location. Oh yeah, the music does some...
Because they're two different companies, and at the end of the day you have to admit that Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 was created by Blizzard North, and Diablo 3 and Diablo 4 were created by Blizzard. And Blizzard does not have the same amazing, like just telltale that Blizzard North did. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. They're two different companies and they have two different styles. But like Diablo 3 was a legitimate failure as far as I'm concerned, whereas Diablo 4 is leagues better than that. At least they're making progress, getting closer to their roots. And I would like to see them do more with Tristram, and hopefully they do eventually. Also, Wolfie, thank you for the donation, man. Wolfie said, thanks for bringing great content and useful facts in all your videos. Donated $38.19. Dang, man. That's a lot of monies. That's $38.19 worth of monies.
Pretty heavy lifting, but the main reason comes down to this phrase: less is more. Bigger isn't always better. Just ask my gargantuan penis. Diablo 1 took place in a single location, Tristram, and there were 8 characters that lived there, a couple cows, and a cathedral that led down to hell where the bad guys were. Each character offered a combination of advice, exposition, and insight for the player. Whenever you got a quest in Diablo 1, you could ask each of the 8 residents about it. This added important context and massive build-up to each quest.
I saw what Farnham calls the Butcher, as it swathed a path through the bodies of my friends. He swung a cleaver as large as an axe, hewing limbs and cutting down brave men.
Why are there so many pixels missing from this video? I don't know what's going on, but there's like no pixels in this. Like the words are even like jiggling on the screen because all the pixels are missing.
Where they stood.
I know more than you think about that grisly fiend. His little friends got a hold of me and managed to get my leg before Griswold pulled me out of that hole. I'll put it bluntly. Kill him before he kills you and adds your corpse to his collection!
By the light, I know of this vile demon. I don't know what he used to slice open his victims, but it could not have been of this world. Beware if you plan to battle this fiend.
The Butcher is a sadistic creature that delights in the torture.
Town is telling.
I mean, I feel like there's a certain irony here in the fact that he's pointing out all of this unique dialogue and fun stuff from Diablo 1, which I enjoyed too. I like talking to Kane and talking to Farnham and all the other stuff and listening to the various people. But like, and what a interesting point to pause the video. He looks that is not a flattering point to pause the video. But like, and then he literally goes through the process of saying he basically skipped all the dialogue on all the quests in Diablo 4. Like, you can't point out how important the dialogue is to a video game, like in Diablo 1 or Diablo 2, and then talk about how in Diablo 4 you skipped it all. Like, how do you even know how important it is if you skipped it all? Like, you didn't read any of it. You didn't listen to any of it. You skipped all the cutscenes. You went out of your way to avoid everything. Like, I mean, if I found a book and I picked up the book and I just simply never read it, but I told everyone it sucked, like, how is that even remotely fair? Like, I have to at least read the book before I tell you it sucks. That's why a lot of the times when you see me make a video, I give you this little resume at the beginning. Like, when I talk, like, I have some videos coming out tomorrow, and they basically go over, like, defensive stats and tanking and stuff like that. So like, at the beginning of the video, I'm like, and I've tanked in tons of MMOs. I'm giving you a little resume. I'm like, and I played Lord of the Rings Online. I played Final Fantasy XI. And I'm trying to impress upon you the fact that I actually know what the hell I'm talking about, right? Well, he basically has impressed upon us that he has no clue what he's talking about, because he told us that he skipped all the dialogue, and he told us that he skipped all the freaking cutscenes. He literally gave us a resume which basically says, don't hire me, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Telling you this guy is a big fucking menace, but from their own unique perspective. This added realism to the world of Diablo and its characters. It created build-up and tension to every quest and every boss fight. There's a reason Blizzard keeps bringing back the Butcher in newer Diablo games, and it's because this quest from the first game is just that iconic. But why?
The spirits of the dead are now avenged.
Well, part of the reason is for every quest in Diablo 1, you get to consult the same 8 characters. This makes the plot easy to follow, as it's not being communicated through like 40 different characters. Diablo 4 is like the exact opposite. It feels like once again the designers had to justify this open world design by having you constantly jumping from one area to the next. No one person, quest, or area is given enough screen time to become truly memorable, aside from a handful of moments. Prime example of this style of writing is the Tree of Whispers. It's an ancient tree decorated with the severed heads of those who pursued its knowledge. Now that sounds fucking awesome, but this place has barely any build-up to it at all. You can't really ask characters to prod their knowledge of it. Lorath and Donan might have a couple lines, but it's nothing deep. So it makes this ultra cool area of the game feel far less important than the world is trying to make it out to be. What it boils down to is, ironically, the original Diablo, which takes place in a single town consisting of 8 characters, tells a vastly more interesting, relatable, and immersive story than all of the towns and people in Diablo 4 combined. Now, maybe that's just nostalgia squirting out my ass, but let me convey this point with a question. Can you name a single blacksmith in Diablo 4? That's what I thought. Remember Griswold?
Whoa, what can I do for you?
Of course you do. Now,
and this is a symptom of having only one place to go, though. Like, when they made older games, the technology was kind of limited, and they really couldn't do as much as you can do in the more modern games, and it definitely does become an issue. But I could pose that same question for just about any game. Can you name 3 or 4 different blacksmiths in Skyrim, aside from the one that's in Whiterun? So the one that's in Whiterun is probably the one that's used the most in Skyrim out of all of the blacksmiths in pretty much the entire game, right? So name me a different blacksmith other than the one that's in Whiterun that literally you go to every single time you go to do blacksmithing. Like, that's kind of like what he's pointing out here, which I feel like is completely unfair, because in a game like this where you have multiple towns, of course you have multiple blacksmiths, and not every NPC in the game is going to be an interesting NPC that you're going to have like put all of your time and effort into. I mean, I get it. Diablo 1 was a very small town, and every single NPC in Diablo 1 was very important because all of the NPCs that you talked to had important lines and could tell you important things, except for Farnham, which really was just kind of useless over in the corner and gave you a couple odd bits of information about some odd quests. But for the most part, Farnham wasn't even really all that useful, although it was funny to go talk to him and listen to his drunken slurs half the time. Now, when you get to Diablo 2, things get a little bit more weird. Like, you have more characters, and the more characters you have, the less important some of them become. Yes, Charcy is a very iconic character. Everybody knows who the hell Charcy is. Akara, and all that other stuff. But, like, do you remember who the NPC is for repairing equipment in Act 4? Like, do you know his name? Do you know the NPC for gambling in Act 4? They're a lot less important, and there's a lot less dialogue options for them. Now, I remember their names. Halbu is the blacksmith, and Halbu is not really all that great of a character. Games don't always have to have every single character be super important, and Halbu is probably one of the examples of literally one of like the worst characters in Diablo 2, because he has like 2 lines, he says nothing, and literally like he doesn't even have good stuff to sell. I'm sorry, Halbu, but you really just like, you're probably one of the worst NPCs in Diablo 2, and most people, if it wasn't for the fact that Diablo 4 used to be the end game of Diablo 2, like, or Act 4 used to be the end game of Diablo 2, most people probably wouldn't even remember Halbu's name, which is really quite sad. And Diablo 1 was just a different beast. You're in one town, you have like a whole 8 NPCs, there's really not a whole lot going on there, and you didn't travel all over the whole world like you do in the other games. I mean, that's like comparing, you know, like Skyrim to like a really old game that only has like one town. Like, if you compared Skyrim to Diablo 1, it just looks absolutely ridiculous by comparison. Like, Skyrim has thousands upon thousands of NPCs, hundreds of different areas to go to, caves, castles, different alternate dimensions that you can travel to. Like, it's absolutely insane as far as content goes. But if I had to compare Skyrim versus Diablo 1, like if somebody asked me like which one would I choose, one over the other, I'd probably still choose Diablo 1, because Diablo 1 is just an amazing classic title. But Skyrim definitely has more content than Diablo 1 does. And it shows, because you can beat Skyrim, you can beat Diablo 1 in like a day, maybe 2 days. Like, if you really stretch it out, it takes you like 3 days. And once you burn through all the content in Diablo 1, there's nothing left. Like, you can go back and you can re-listen to the same comments. You can go do the same quest 100 different times. But there is a point at which Diablo 1 meets its maximum saturation, and there's literally nothing left for you to do. Skyrim, on the other hand, you can pick a direction and go, and you can literally spend hundreds, like, if not thousands of hours in Skyrim and still not explore everything that there is to learn in that game, which is absolutely insane. And I would take this guy's, word a little bit more seriously if he didn't just tell us literally that he skipped all the dialogue in Diablo 4.
Run with me on this for a second. Instead of having one blacksmith who's like an actual character that you can talk to, who also repairs your shit and sells you stuff, we now have 75 soulless, empty blacksmiths scattered across the land of Sanctuary, none of whom play any role in the story or contribute at all to the world building. This doesn't apply to just the blacksmiths in the world of Diablo 4. It applies.
So he's actually wrong, because one of the blacksmiths actually does contribute to the world building and actually does have quests, and that is the blacksmith that you do the quest for the barbarian to get access to your expertise. She also has several other quests that involve going to get a specific rare weapon that apparently has been lost to time, and she wants to restore it and put it back into use because apparently it slayed lots of demons in the past. And if you actually pay attention, like if he had actually played more than one character and probably leveled up past level 50, he probably would have come across this NPC, this blacksmith, who actually has more than just like the repair options available. Like, and she's literally sitting right there in front of a massive forge that you can click on and like smacking an anvil just like Charcy does.
To all vendors in the game. They serve no purpose outside of gameplay, which I guess it's fine. Like, it's lazy, but it's fine. But do you see the conundrum? Since Diablo 4 is an open world game, if you take out 70 blacksmiths and leave only 5 or whatever, then it becomes tedious to find them. And Blizzard clearly didn't want to go through the effort of writing each blacksmith to be an actual character, and I don't blame them for that. My point is that in so many ways, Blizzard seems to sacrifice world building for an open world. Now, call me crazy, but I think vendors and merchants play an important role in a video game, especially if that game is an RPG.
Don't get yourself killed. Neither of us want to see you go hollow.
Welcome to the Circus of Value!
Got something that might interest you.
No, I think all NPCs should play some kind of role in an RPG or offer a slice of life. But outside the characters in the main story, most of the people who inhabit Sanctuary aren't memorable or important at all. And therefore, neither is Sanctuary itself. I don't know, man. The scaling difficulty and restrictive skill trees make the core gameplay feel extremely easy, boring, and repetitive, and with some slight changes that they'll probably never do, would improve the game vastly. The loot is uninteresting, most of the game's content is shit I just ended up skipping trying to get to the fun part, but I never really got to the fun part. In the end, for all of Blizzard's efforts to make Diablo 4 a massive open world game with tons of replayability, content, and depth, it ends up being no deeper than the puddle in my backyard. And that is why Diablo 4 is so bad. Thank you all.
Ugh, this is terrible. Wow, why did I watch this exactly? Like, I don't even. I feel like the opinions expressed in here, like, while maybe about 20% of what he said was dead on, a lot of it was just gross exaggerations. And then he was dead wrong about so many things throughout this entire freaking video. Like, I've already gone like two hours lately talking about a lot of the stuff. Like, he didn't even mention Vigo. Like, how honestly can we really take this seriously if one of the first most impressive quests within the game, literally involving one of the most iconic characters of Diablo 4 so far, which is Vigo, he didn't even mention Vigo. Anybody who has played this game and actually paid attention to the dialogue and the quests and the actual cutscenes would have mentioned Vigo. Like, that entire quest line was amazing, and I freaking love Vigo, and I'm really sad that he's dead. But like I feel like he played the game because he was forced to. Does that make sense to you guys? Like, does that really, like, feel like what's going on here? Like, that someone, like, held a gun to the back of his head and, like, made him play the game, and that, like, the only reason he played it was because the guy with the gun was there, and then after the guy with the gun left, like, he just, like, made a video about how much he hated it, but, like, the entire time he was playing it, like, like he was forced to play it. That's how it comes off with, like he was literally forced to play the game and he didn't have another choice in the matter. And I've played games before where someone has accused me of that, and I'm like, no, I generally wanted to play the game and it just sucked, right? And so it felt kind of crappy when somebody said that to me, that basically, like, I was just forcing myself to play the game for views. But I can give you an example. I absolutely hated Last Epic. That's right, I'll even type it in. I despise that game. I don't know what it is about that game, but I absolutely hated it. And I played the game. I did like a full, like, I can't remember, I think it was like 8 hours of playtime in that game, and I couldn't stand it. I could not stand that game. and literally my disdain for that game like was showing through to the point where people started to accuse me of, you know, that basically the same thing, that I only played the game because I was forced to. But the truth of the matter is I literally just picked it up one day and I just wanted to have some fun, and I thought it would be cool to try out a new game. A lot of people had talked really good about it, and I was like, you know what, let's give it a try. And like, I mean, it just didn't turn out to be my cup of tea. But there's other things like Nariel. Like, I was talking about Nariel being like absolutely a terrible character within the game. He didn't call out Nariel being a terrible character either, which makes me think he just skipped all that stuff. Because, like, nobody who actually played the game would ignore Nariel as one of the worst characters literally in the series. Like, this boy is hating on the game so hard that he's, like, scraping the bottom of the barrel trying to find things to hate on, but he missed out on literally one of the most hateable characters that literally exists within Diablo 4. Nariel is a hateable character. She is super hateable. Like, I don't care who you are. Like, Nariel just, like, constantly did things wrong all the time, was constantly in trouble, constantly running off, and constantly doing stupid things. Even till the end of the story, where she literally just did the most ridiculously stupid thing that she could ever possibly do. And she was just a terrible character. Like, I did not like Nariel, and yes, I feel like she was kind of shoehorned into the story. And he didn't point her out at all, which is really freaking suspicious for someone who played through the entire campaign and wanted to find things to complain about. I'm surprised he didn't complain about Nariel being just like an absolute waste of space in the campaign. Anyway, this video has already been going for 2 hours, so let's go ahead and end it here. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we're just reacting to this. And as always, keep watching.